Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Darlene Rupke, and I am really excited that you're here to join us tonight for our webinar, 5 Ways to Book the Best Weddings. I do apologize, we had a Zoom link error, so this is going to come to you by replay, but we're very, very grateful that you're here, and we're excited to share our best practices when finding and navigating through wedding season and finding that ideal client and how to do that. So welcome everyone. A little bit of background about myself before we dive in. I have been in the industry for about 35 years. I am basically a flower nerd, top of the line flower nerd right here. I have loved this industry since I was 15, and I started out in a little mom and pop shop and then got educated at Humber. From there, I worked in the city for about 15 years, working with event companies, and was a lead designer, specialized in purchasing and production, as well as customer service. And then I basically moved up into head design position as my career evolved. And then eventually I opened my own studio in 2005. And I had that studio for about 16 years. Throughout that 16 years, one of my favorite things to do was host workshops and work with clients directly. And I just love to see how they could find joy with floral design. So it's always been one of my favorite things was to teach and educate. And I also loved to do that myself. So I've had the privilege of traveling to the Netherlands, to New York, to California, and learning from some of the top designers across the planet, as well as having some mentors in my back corner. One of the things I struggled with, though, in my own studio was always, doing all the great things with design, but failing as far as business goes. And that's what I really started to dive into education and improving myself and my systems. When I had my shop for about 5 or 6 years, that was one of the things I really dove into. And that's how I ended up here. So I sold my studio in 2021 and started Petal Academy, which is a platform that I'm really proud to be empowering florists that are new beginners, people that love flowers, people that want to dive into design and learn all the aspects of the business. So we are here to help transform your journey as a shop owner, as a designer, as a flower farmer, and so that you can get big success out of dealing with all the things that the industry brings to us. So welcome. I'm going to go to my first slide here, which is why we're here tonight. So we are going to go through a bunch of pointers. We're going to define our ideal client. We're going to set up some ideas on how to produce our packaging and our pricing. We're going to talk about how to build your online presence and get a great portfolio. We're going to talk about what sorts of things to address in a consultation. And we're going to talk about how to establish boundaries and clear expectations from our clients. That's one of the main things that's going to help us on our way. So let's go to slide 1. We're going to dive into our first points here. So, number one thing that I want to address is know who you're talking to. I think this was one of the things that I really struggled with when I started my business. As all new business owners, we have the tendency to say yes to everything. And that can be really, really great, but it also can be very hard because it ends up causing us sometimes to work with clients that maybe aren't aligning with our best aesthetic or pushing us to do things that we're not quite on board with. So, what I mean by that is, I'll give you a little bit of a background story. I had the privilege of working with a local golf course before I launched my store. And I was doing all of their weddings exclusively. So by doing that, I was handed the clients and worked with every aesthetic that they would give me. A lot of times it aligned fairly well with what I wanted to do design wise, but I basically had to say yes to everything. Whenever I opened my store, they gave me the opportunity of referring all of those clients to me moving forward. So that was great, except I was again saying yes to everything without really having a good defined idea of what I wanted to do as far as what style of weddings, what kinds of clients I wanted to work with, even the size of wedding. I didn't really have any idea of what I was doing. I just said yes to everything. I ended up getting very burnt out. I think I did over 80 weddings in my first wedding season when I owned my brick and mortar store. And I also struggled with pricing because I had no idea to come up for air and have a look at what was going right and what was going wrong. So, one of my best suggestions is to really narrow in on what you want to bring to the world as far as what you want to do in design, your style, your aesthetic, Decide that. Decide what sizes of weddings you want to work on. Is it small, little intimate weddings? Is it elopement packages? Is it pickup weddings? So the client orders everything and you do everything a la carte and they pick everything up and they set it up. Is it a full service wedding? So is it the type of thing where you're working with a wedding planner and you're doing the bouquets, the centerpieces, the ceremony, the reception, the whole thing? Is it a luxe wedding where you're actually working maybe hand in hand, or the wedding planners are booking you out and you're doing rentals and all kinds of things, tablecloths and candelabras and set pieces and beautiful room transformations with draping and all kinds of things? Is that the kind of wedding you want to do? Decide those things. And then make sure that all of your messaging reflects that, so that you're attracting that kind of client. And we'll get into that in the next couple of points. But if you're really unsure and you're not knowing where to start with that, and you've just started the wedding industry, one of the things you can do is, if you look at your last few weddings, so look at last year's wedding season, or even if you've only done a couple at this point, look at what you love to do. What resonated with you? What clients filled your cup? What ones brought you the most joy? Which ones made you miserable? Which ones brought you down? Which ones did you struggle to satisfy? Make a list of those two things and do a comparison and see what really resonated with you as far as that goes, and what values it brought. Are you the type of wedding florist that wants to work with brides that really value sustainability and local flowers? Is that what you want to bring to the world? Did brides want something that was imported and you didn't feel right about that? Write all those things down and make a list of what really spoke to you. And that's how you sort of define your ideal client avatar. The other thing that is a really good suggestion is, if you're looking at your wedding business or your business in general, I had a brick and mortar store as well as a retail store, as well as a wedding and event business. So everything was combined under one roof. But I did an evaluation of where my dollars were coming from, because I wanted to set my entire revenue. When I started to really dive into what was going to make my business work better, it's taking a look and a snapshot of where your overall revenue needs to sit. I knew that my overall revenue was coming from about 40% of walk-in brick and mortar daily orders, anniversaries, those types of things, workshops, and 60% was coming from events and weddings. So I knew that overall, if my yearly revenue needed to be, $240,000 or $260,000, and $200,000 of that, I know my math is going to be off here, but $200,000 of that is my weddings. I knew that maybe in the perfect world, I could, and I wanted to do luxe weddings at that point, I would hone in on getting $10,000, $20,000 weddings. And that's how I would arrive at that revenue number, right? And so if you're working with smaller budgets or lower income budgets, you may need to get more brides. And then you can ask yourself, where do I find these brides, right? If I'm looking for luxe brides, where are they shopping? Do I need to partner with a wedding planner that's going to bring me those contacts? Do I need to do trade shows that are going to reflect that sort of aesthetic of wedding? Where do I find those brides? And that's how you can align your messaging, your marketing, and all of the things that go into finding those clients, so that you're working with the right type of fit. And I will say one thing, when you narrow into that exact client, everything becomes easier. I know it's hard to say no, but when you get laser focused on that ideal client, you will find more joy in what you're doing every day, and you will be able to serve that client so much better. One of my favorite expressions is, when you have a no, it opens the doors to better yeses. So keep that in mind if you're feeling awkward about saying no to a client. Just know that sometimes when we say no, it opens the doors to better yeses. So there we go. Let's move on to slide number 2. So pricing like a pro. That's what we want to do. So these slides are going to be available for you afterwards as well. But pricing like a pro, we want to get really, really, really specific on what we're offering, and we want to be able to give some assets that reflect that. So one of the things that I find can be a little bit ambiguous whenever you're booking brides is same thing I'm going to speak to before was we say yes to everything, right? We get inquiries online, we book consultations right away, we get them in the shop, and it ends up being something that we might not want to take on. So, one of the things that I learned was ask questions up front and design an onboarding process that can really reflect what the ideal client, what type of ideal client you're looking for. So how I would do that is I had a inquiry section on my website. So if I had a bride, I had a wedding section, they would click inquire here and they would get a questionnaire to fill out. And that would prompt them for questions like, where are you? Where's your wedding happening? Who are you working with? How did you find me? Who are you referred to? This will all give you a little bit of background information. What's your budget? That sort of thing. And that would sort of set up a little bit of a moment for success. Now, if you don't want to go to the extent of having a questionnaire, send them a package. So it was like a welcome package. And I put that together and it was a PDF of all of my, some of my past wedding photos. So it best represented my brand, my aesthetic. My shop name was Seasons. And so I love to work with seasonal materials and work with nature and all those things and have a bit of a beautiful design aesthetic, but also very nature inspired. So that was really what my aesthetic represented. And when I showcased that with photos from professional photos from brides that I had worked with, I also gave a description of the different levels of packages. Now, I decided to come up with 3 packages. So I had a basic package, which was kind of like your very basic wedding, just bridal work and ceremony. And then I had your full service wedding package, which included setup and teardown, as well as all the florals for the wedding, personal flowers, wedding flowers, ceremony, reception, and anything else, aisle decor, all the things. And then I had a luxe package, which was higher end because I did want to attract a few of those clients a year. I decided, I think in the long run, I wanted to take on about 5 luxe clients and about 20 average clients, and then maybe 2 or 3 smaller clients, right? So that was all lined out as well as what we provided with those levels of investment. And there was clear photos and just a nice journey of all the things that we offered. So it was clearly laid out. So I would send that to inquiries right away along with the questionnaire and get some feedback from them to discover if this was an ideal client for us to be wanting to take to the next level. So that was really good. So all these things are laid out in this little slide here that you can see. But it really does give a better professional look to those clients that you're looking for, that you know the type of client that you're looking for and that everything is transparent, right? So it also helps build trust when you do that. So try to set up that type of situation so that you've got those assets to send to that client right away. If you find that a client isn't a good fit, you don't have to say, sorry, I can't help you. Good luck finding someone who can. Refer them to someone. You may know someone who's up and coming or just started in the industry, or someone that specializes in luxe packages and you don't, or rentals and you don't. Maybe this is a good opportunity for you to provide a couple of names that you could refer in the industry. Be friendly. We all know each other. And if you don't have that in your assets, go and find some uh, local florists that you can work with. So, and you can say, hey, if I'm booked up on a certain wedding, or if I have a wedding come to me that's not quite my aesthetic, I want to work with only locally grown flowers. I'm really sustainability and working with locally grown flowers is my number one value. And I have a client that wants import flowers. It's not my thing. I'm going to send them to you and work out that relationship. And that will be a really beautiful thing because it allows them to take on that work and it allows you to feel good about getting a referral. So always keep those things in your mind. So the next thing I'm going to talk about on our next slide here is building out your portfolio, which is so, so, so important. Often overlooked, if I may say so myself. I did it myself. So a little story about this, and it was kind of a bit of a pain point for me, is I had one of my ideal clients, so what I would have called my client avatar, my ideal client. She used to come in and shop all the time. Her son was getting married. and she was very specific. So I was a little bit afraid to sort of give her suggestions. This was where my confidence with doing consultations was a little bit lower. It was at the beginning of my business. Um, and she wanted me to meet her at the venue, and I met her at the venue, and she told me to bring a sample, and she told me exactly what she wanted in the sample. So I thought I was doing everything right. At the time, and this is kind of going to make you guys laugh, but this is probably over 20 years ago, all I had was a binder with some pictures from magazines cut out in there that kind of reflected the sort of work that I wanted to do, and that's all I had. I hadn't asked previous brides for photos. I didn't have a catalog that reflected any of the work that I'd really done that I was proud of. And that was my fault because I'd done all those weddings at the golf course. I should have had lots of photos. And I had a few, but they didn't really speak um, that I was really experienced. It didn't really shout out that I was like, oh my gosh, we have to work with this florist. So much to my demise, I found out after that meeting a couple weeks later that the bride decided to book with another florist who had provided this glamorous presentation and these elaborate things that she was going to add to the wedding. And I was not getting the wedding. So I took that with a really hard at first. And then I thought to myself, wait a second, what can I learn from this? And one of the things that stood out was that I didn't provide enough information or evidence that I could handle a wedding of that caliber. I didn't have anything that I could show these clients at that meeting that I had it all together. So at that point, I put together a PowerPoint presentation because I think back then that was all we had. I put together a PowerPoint presentation that had a lot of good photos and all of my assets and that journey, so that it showed that journey a little bit better. And then as things evolved, we started doing photo shoots. So this is something really important. And I started asking all of my brides for the professional photos. I started working with photographers and partnering with them to ask for photos so that we could use those. Oftentimes, photographers are grateful that you will use their work as long as you tag them and provide the right credits for their photos. You can often use them on your website or on your social medias, and particularly in your portfolio. Make sure they're in there. Make sure your portfolio reflects the type of work that you want to do. Very, very laser focused. Make sure that it's got great assets in there and explains that journey to that client really, really well. If you don't have those types of things and you're just starting out and you're like, where do I even start with this? What I would suggest is hiring a photographer, or get a friend that can take really badass photos with their phone to follow you around while you're executing a wedding. So if you've got a wedding planned and you can photograph it from start to finish, and I mean photograph you picking up flowers from the flower farm, or uh, picking up your flowers from your vendors, showing you working on those designs. So you in action, as well as all the work that you did at the end, boutonnieres, corsages. There's a checklist here that you can go through that'll give you all of the assets that you should have from a good photo shoot. At the very, very least, if you do not have a wedding coming up where you can photograph this or hire a photographer to follow you around on a wedding that best represents your aesthetic, it'd be great if it represented your brand colors too. If you don't have that opportunity, purchase some flowers. Purchase some flowers, book an Airbnb or book a venue if you can. Maybe you can partner with one of the venues you work with and say, hey, I want to borrow your venue for a couple of hours to do a photo shoot. Is that okay? How much will that cost? Right? Work with them on that level and get those assets where they need to be, right? Maybe it's showing you doing an install. How fabulous would it be if there's a venue that you work at all the time and it shows you up on installing a beautiful arch that is the common place where people do their ceremony, right? You in action with a beautiful site that demonstrates the type of work that you want to do. That's a great thing to have in your portfolio. So make sure that there's a checklist there. The other things that are great to include on that photo shoot is things where you're consulting, right? Maybe there's headshots of you. So have headshots there in case you ever get an opportunity to do speaking engagements. Or if some of the vendors you work with want to have a headshot of you that they can showcase in some of their marketing material. That's a great thing to have right on hand. Make sure you've got photos of you working on a laptop, maybe with a cup of coffee, maybe with some flowers beside you to show that you're working, busy, curating these beautiful weddings and deciding the prototypes and how everything's going to go. Maybe you need photos of you holding a phone. Maybe there's some photos of you at a local flower farm where you're picking up the flowers. And like I mentioned, in your flower vendors, picking up your orders. Show the whole journey. It really helps build trust, and it empowers your clients to know that you're capable of handling this wedding. They can see you in action. So it's a really great suggestion. So that's really important. Make sure you've got all those assets lined up. And of course, all of these can be shared on your social media, right? So when the biggest thing I want to say about um, when you're in the floral industry, if you don't show them, they're not going to know. So you got to put this out there in every aspect that you possibly can. Don't be shy either. If you want to get behind the camera and you can show up and show yourself designing a beautiful bouquet in action, maybe that's on Instagram. Maybe it's a TikTok. Maybe it's a YouTube channel. Maybe it's going to show your event staff setting up that wedding and you've got a YouTube channel that shows the back end and what happens behind the scenes. Maybe that's a great way to build trust with your clients. So nothing is off the table here. Make sure that you're showing up and showing people what work you want to do and how you're doing it. It's a great way to build trust. So never shy away from that. If you've got strengths in that department and you want to shine in that department, those are my best suggestions. Let's move on to our next slide here, which is asking the right questions. So whenever we're doing that whole process, and we talked a little bit about the onboarding, so sending off that inquiry, sending off that investment package, whenever we're meeting with our clients in person, and this may be something that you do over Zoom, if you want to cut down on the amount of time that you're committing to meeting with clients, that's a great way to have a first initial discoveries call. Sometimes it could be a 15-minute call or a half-hour call. You just want to knock out some of those things that may not have been addressed in that initial inquiry form. So things like guest count, you might not have discussed that in your initial form. The exact theme, maybe you want to narrow in on exactly, like I've put in here on this little checklist, 3 words that best describe their wedding, right? That'll give you a really good sense of who they are and what they want to establish with what you're going to design for them. And if you can achieve that for them, right? Then what kinds of flowers do they love, right? Is this something that you like to work with? Is there something they don't like? Don't leave that off because that's kind of important, right? If they hate a certain type of flower and you're like head set on using that in every wedding that you produce, maybe that's not quite the right fit, right? And is there things that they're dreaming of? Like, are they thinking of this big hanging installation? And are you like totally biting your nails or staying awake late at night thinking of, oh my gosh, I can't believe someone's going to ask me to do something like that? That's probably not a good fit until you have some experience, right? And if experience is what you're lacking, go out and take a course. More on that later. But invest in learning so that you do feel more confident when you're working with these up and coming clients. Make sure you talk about budget. That's really important. And that was probably something that was on that inquiry form, but make sure you hone in on it. What parts of their budget are more important, right? Are they really fixated on having beautiful bouquets because that's what they want to have, beautiful bouquets with their photography? Or is the reception really important, right? Or are they just candles at the reception? Where does their budget lie? What sorts of things do they want to sort of have as being those like really important photo moments and things like that that they want to capture that are going to be where they want to have the money shots is what we call them. What vendors are they working with, right? Are there people that you're familiar with? Are there venues that you're working with that you've worked in before as well? Are you familiar with these venues? Is there parameters around those venues that make you uncomfortable, right? Back to the flowers for one quick second. Make sure that they're not fixated on something that you just can't promise, right? That's one of the hard lessons that I learned as well. Sometimes I had once upon a time a client that said she had to have peonies because her grandmother had peonies in her wedding. Well, it was a little bit early, and some of the peonies we got in didn't quite open as fully as I would have wanted them to, but I had in my head that this particular client needed to have peonies. Well, overall, she loved the flowers, but she did mention to me at the end of it that she would have preferred something that was a little more open because I think we were doing floating flowers or something. And I could have suggested a big open garden rose. but I thought she had to have peonies. So we didn't really have that transparent conversation. And it ended up being a situation where I felt like I didn't show up to my best to serve her because I probably could have suggested something better and she would have been a happier client at the end of the day. So always have those little conversations that are going to help you hone in on exactly how to serve that client better. And then make sure you're talking about communication style with your brides, right? Make sure they know when you're available, how you work. Sometimes when I was taking on a wedding, I would make it really clear that, especially if you're booking 6 months to 12 months out, say to them, hey, this is great. We're getting our consultation, we're getting our deposits, everything's moving forward. Do a deep dive into wedding season and serving my clients between, maybe your heavy wedding season is May through October. So if you're sending me an email and your wedding's in November, don't expect to hear back right away during that time period. I'm just going to be a little bit longer to respond because I'm really serving the client that's coming up next. That's my priority at that time. And make that an open conversation. Also, let them know when you work on your weddings. So maybe you're going to pick a day of the week where you sit down and follow up with your clients, your vendors, all those things, do your ordering on a specific day where you're sitting and doing office work. Maybe that's the best time to say, hey, I'm available on Tuesdays from 11 a.m. until 4 p.m. to answer any wedding inquiries or questions that you have. Other than that, you can book a consultation with me, a quick Zoom call, and maybe you want to address how many of those calls they're allowed to have, right? Just be really clear about it and set yourself up for success there so that your process is outlined, how you work is outlined, so that there's no expectations there that are going to let them down, right? You don't want to under deliver and over promise. You want to over deliver, right? You want to over deliver, right? That's what you want to hit. So always think about that. You want to make sure that you're exceeding their expectations, not just meeting them. So let's move on to our next slide, which is setting up our conduct with our establish our clear communications. This is number 5, boundaries and building trust. This is a big one. So we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier where, hey, those photos can really give us a lot of impact and trust with our clients. But beyond that, what is really good to have in your process is a contract. So right away, I want to share with you that was one of the main things that I transformed my business was when I started using proper software to do quoting and to communicate with my clients. So all that onboarding process, that questionnaire, sending those initial pricing guides, all those things were sent through a software. And I used to use Tave, but a really good one is Honeybook. I know that that's a newer one. It wasn't available in Canada, I think, back when I had my studio, but it is now. So that's one you can look at. And there are several others that serve that as well. But it's a great spot because you can have everything living on a cloud basis with your photos, your mood boards, all of your quotes, your pricing, your sign-offs, everything can live there. And that's a great way for you to show up really professionally with your clients and to look and to have everything in one location, right? Having a bunch of papers like we used to do at old school all over the place with notes here and there and you can't find things is a chaotic mess that will only drive you insane during wedding season. So try to navigate towards having a onboarding software that you can use through the process of the wedding that backs up all of your information and clearly outlines everything in there. That is one of the things once you're meeting with your brides. And sometimes what I would do after that discoveries call, when you have them in for that consultation, you're doing that deep dive, you're setting up that quote with all of the prices and going through all of the particulars and what's included in the wedding. This is when you want to bring the contract out and go through all the expectations, their expectations, how they like to be communicated to. Do they like text messages? Do they like emails? When are they available, right? Make sure that's all outlined. Make sure you've got all of your things that you want to offer in there. We are going to be on site from these hours. We are going to provide these elements. These are the costs. This is when the deposits are due. This is when final payment is due. Who is paying? all the things. You can pull up a contract usually by Googling, florist contracts, and it'll give you a few templates to look at. Always write your own, or you can usually buy a PDF software version of it off of a site. I think there's a lot of good ones out there. Jotform, I think, is one that I've used before. Make sure that it aligns with all of the aspects of your business outlined in that contract, and then you can email that over to your lawyer to look over and um, customize it for your shop. Make sure that that's all in there. But those are the types of things that when you're finalizing and going through those final moments of the consultation, that you get everyone on board with all of those expectations and boundaries. Boundaries is a big one. Whenever you're working with a client and they don't know what your boundaries are, then they're maybe going to push the boundaries, right? But when you clearly lay out the boundaries, they are going to respect them. And what I mean by that is, like I said earlier, if you're laying out when you're available to chat with them, or letting them know that you might be longer to respond, also let them know. And this is a great way. If someone texts you at 10 o'clock at night with a wedding question and you answer it right back, then it kind of opens the door that, hey, that's okay. They're willing to answer me at that time. No, maybe it's not okay. Maybe you want to really stick to your office hours and make sure that they're aware of that. Make sure you've got that in there, because um, it can get really, really, you can get really, really resentful when you put in a lot more hours than you allotted to with a consultation or quoting. That's another thing you should have in your contract. If you're revising a quote or having to meet with a bride or hold their hand a little bit more or discuss options a little bit more regularly than you normally would, make sure that you have in there, this contract will include a sample consultation, which will happen on this date, and then any revisions or added time that needs to be adjusted or edited for anything will be billed at so much per hour, right? Also, with setups and things like that, we will execute all of the elements that are lined out in the quote and the contract. Um, if there's anything additional that you want us to do, as far as like putting out name cards or adding something to a ceremony site like candles or something that you weren't really counting on, make sure that there's a price tag attached with that so that you don't get surprised with the extra work on the day of, that they're not hitting you with that unexpectedly on the day of. So you're set up with success, you bring extra staff for those types of things, and that there's a price tag attached to it. So it's, yeah, this is our floral setup, and if you need this setup, this is what this is going to cost you. If they're bringing in their own elements and things like that, it's a really, really good thing to discuss ahead of time. Also, another thing in the contract that you want to make sure you've got in there is availability of flowers, and if you have to make substitutions, and what things are okay and what things aren't okay. Just like my story about the rose and the peony earlier. You want to make sure that those are all outlined in there so that everybody is on the same page. I think one of the biggest challenges that uh, was something that I overcame or learned a lot from was putting really clear communication out to my clients, because the relationship was a lot better when I did that, and I ended up with better clients, ones who respected me, ones who trusted my design aesthetic, ones who aligned with my design aesthetic. And oftentimes when I hit that ideal client, um, everything became easier whenever that happened. So it was much easier to work with somebody that trusted me, that understood what my pricing was, that understood what I was bringing to the table, what they understood, what they needed to add to the wedding that was beyond their quote, and they knew that they had to discuss that with me ahead of time and share that information with me if that was the case. All of those things made the experience with the brides and the clients a lot more seamless. Okay, so that and joyful, right? That's really what we're here to do. We're providing people with joy, so it should be joyful. The things that can kind of give you a bit of a red flag sometimes whenever you're going through your consultations and working with clients is anything that just maybe, if they start to really push you into, whenever you're doing that initial consultation, they start to really push you into, I need to have this, or I really need this, or anything like that, where they're being a little demanding and you're or maybe it's the way they want to pay you. Maybe the schedule is not what fits for you, or maybe they want to pay you in a form that doesn't work for you. Be really clear on that, because when you're just like, oh yeah, that I'll deal with that later, it becomes it can become something monumentous that is going to take your energy and your focus off of giving the best to the clients that you need to serve whenever. And let's face it, when we are doing a wedding season, we've got lots of clients to serve in a short amount of time. Often it's very hectic work. It's um, you've got to ensure everything's fresh, beautiful. You've got staff um, to manage and all the things. So we want to make sure that our energy is going to the right people at the right time, and we want to make sure that all of that energy is in the right areas. So when you clearly communicate all of those things to your clients, it's just going to give you a better experience all around. I think that's pretty much all that we needed to talk about tonight. One thing I did want to mention is we are launching a bouquet masterclass. So you'll be getting an invite to that after these through the next few emails. And we're just really, really grateful that you've joined us today. Um, just to back up a little bit of what we were saying here, we've learned how to this is our recap for tonight. We've learned how to define our ideal client. We've learned how to set our pricing and our packaging up for best success. We've learned how to level up those portfolios so that they stand out and they're attracting the right types of clients that we want to attract. We've learned how to have those hard conversations, those in-depth consultation questions that are going to set you up for success. We've learned how to properly outline a contract so that everything is covered in there. Now, I truly recommend doing a deep dive into those contracts, getting your lawyer to look it over and making sure it's custom to you. But that's that. But back to where I was, the Bouquet Masterclass is coming to you. So if you are a new florist or you're a florist farmer and you're looking to improve your skills in floral design, we are going to go through 3 classes. So it's going to happen once a week for 3 weeks. We're starting in May. And we are going to start with your basic style of bouquet. I like to teach the European spiral hand-tied. It's been my favorite, something that has been just transformative for my business in all facets. One of the reasons I love it is because it's really easy to teach. So you can teach other employees how to do it. It's also it works for your basic bouquet as far as your shop display bouquets, your market bouquets, all the way through. That'll be our first class. Our second class is going to focus on how to transform those bouquets into more of a gardening look, something you can cut and put into a vase so it can become a vase arrangement. And then the third evening is going to be bridal bouquets. We're going to do a deep, intensive dive into that, learning how to work with wiring and making a bridal bouquet so that it lasts and it's beautiful, and all the tips and tricks that I share from my adventures over the last 30 years are going to be included in all those classes. You're going to get an ebook recipe, so that's going to come to you. It's going to have all of the elements that you need to go out and source for the class. We're going to teach it live, so you can ask Q&A, which I think is fantastic. Gives you guys an opportunity to learn. If you can't attend live, the video will come to you. But that video can be used as a reference as you move forward and build your skills. It can also be used to train your staff. So it's a great way to have that asset there for onboarding new staff so that they can get up to speed on the types of designs that you want to offer to your clients and give them some skills. So that's all going to be included. But that ebook will give you the recipe with the maintenance and the floral names and the Latin names and all the things that you need to move forward with confidence and success. Thank you guys for watching tonight. Really sorry about the Zoom link again, but we are here to serve you. If you have any questions, info@petalacademy.com is the best way to reach out to us. We are going to do a live Q&A to marry up with this presentation. So perhaps we'll meet on a Zoom next week, and we'll do a live Q&A to answer any questions that you have beyond tonight's presentation. But thanks for joining us. Be fearless with flowers, and until next